powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Now, live from inside the Matt Black Kia Studios, this is Football at 4.
Football at 4 is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast as we are coming up on 1 month to Eagles training camp, July 25th. The Birds will reset. They have a little time off, but plenty of stuff to dive into as the guys over at Inside the Birds and the podcast did this past week. They had Jason Avant on the pod, getting a chance to hear what he thought about the Eagles offseason and some of the things about the additions to this team and how they might fit in. We got our first chance to see the team last week, and I'm going to get Geoff Mosher's thoughts and what he thought Jason Avant had to say about when you change coordinators. Brian Johnson is the new coordinator there, and Avant's a guy who obviously played in the league, Mosh, and had a chance to play for multiple coordinators. How that kind of impacts a team when you have to change a coordinator, even when there's a guy who's been there, been a part of the staff. Well, how does he think the impact will how that will affect this offense?
Yeah, he thinks it's a pretty big impact, Mike, and it's a fair observation that I don't know that even we on Inside the Birds have talked about enough, Adam Kaplan and I. Because Brian Johnson goes to offensive coordinator, he has less of a day-to-day responsibility with Jalen Hurts. And we know that he's known Jalen Hurts since Jalen Hurts was a little kid, and that it was seemingly a good thing for Jalen Hurts' development to have Brian Johnson by his side every single day coaching him. And now that he's the OC, it takes a lot away from just the day-to-day task of managing a quarterback, but it also put Alex Tanney into that role. And Alex Tanney, the organization loves him. We've talked about him a lot. But the reality is he's not a very experienced quarterback coach. He's just rose up the ranks from offensive quality control. And if you want to draw sort of a parallel to what kind of impact that can have without ever being apples to apples, because everybody's different, right? But you remember how good Carson played when he had Frank Reich and John DeFilippo alongside Doug Peterson. And his coach on a day-to-day basis was John DeFilippo, who had been a quarterback's coach, had been an offensive coordinator, had interviewed for head coaching jobs. He was a veteran in this game. Well, as soon as he wound up leaving for Jacksonville, and then Frank Reich got that late Indianapolis job, well, then everything around Carson Wentz changed, and then his new quarterback's coach and new offensive coordinator I think Press Taylor was the QB coach, and Mike Groh went to offensive coordinator. And you saw that the relationship between Carson and Groh as an OC wasn't great, and that the relationship was good with Press Taylor, but some felt Press was too coddling, right? Press, like Alex Tanney, did not have a whole lot of experience when he stepped into that role. So, again, not to paint this as to apples, because Jalen Hurts is a different guy. But what remains to be seen is how does this dynamic change with Brian Johnson not day-to-day with Jalen Hurts so much as far as developing him, and a guy like Alex Tanney in that spot who doesn't have a ton of experience doing it. Yeah, at least he's a quarterback, but not a lot of experience coaching.
I guess a question, Mike, a follow-up might be to the quarterback, what is more important, the relationship with the quarterback coach or the offensive coordinator?
It's a great question. I think that when you look back at Carson Wentz, and I hate to make everything about Carson Wentz, but young quarterback, year one, year two, John DeFilippo is credited as the person who held Carson accountable, who would say after his rookie year, and John DeFilippo has been on Inside the Birds with us and talked to us about it. He would tell Carson, you're a good quarterback, but you need to do this, that, and the other to get better. And at first Carson, was sort of like, all that? I'm pretty good, And then John said, no, you need to, right? And then we saw the level that he played at. The offensive coordinator works with the quarterback, but really the offensive coordinator's job is to be ready for every game each week. And that involves taking all the information that you get from your assistants. What do we want to do on third down? What do we want to do in the red zone? How do we want to script the first 15 plays? It's not as much on with the quarterback. It's about the entire offense, obviously. So I do think that there's a potential impact there, and we'll just have to see. I think the one thing that we could say, Mike, is that Jalen Hurts has shown that he's very coachable, he's very accountable, and that he wants to get better. But you can't change the coaching around you. If it's not that good, then that becomes an issue.
I'd like to, interject about Sirianni and what his role in the offense is. I mean, he was an offensive guy. He was an offensive coordinator. How much synergy and streamlining of the, continuity does he bring to that, the game day, calling plays, all that stuff?
Yeah, I mean, from what we understand, it's a lot. He knows the plays going in every time the play is called. So it's not like he's sort of a guy on the sidelines who's just being a CEO. He is a CEO head coach. He lets his coordinators do the responsibilities that they're supposed to do, but he's very involved in the game plan, how it's going to look, as most head coaches from whatever side of the ball are on do.
Yeah, and, he was he's come a long way. And I think Jason mentioned this in the podcast, that he was – a guy the first year they came out, throw, and then they became a team that ran the ball. So I would imagine that Sirianni does have some – now, the first year, did he call plays when he was here and then turned it over?
Yes, he turned it over in the middle of the year to Shane Steichen when they redesigned their offense.
Right.
He wanted to take a step back and make sure everybody was on the same page.
Yeah, so he has shown some versatility in his role as the coach, and I would imagine he has a lot of relationship or dealings with his quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, of course. But although I would say yes, but I really see Nick Sirianni. You can see his development with the wide receivers because that's his pedigree. That's where he comes from. And when you watch him in OTAs and training camp, I mean, he really works with the wide receivers on everything from getting out of breaks to there was even an OTA where I saw him getting on. Oh man, I don't remember who it was, but sight adjustments are a big part of what slot receivers do, and you can break in, you can break out based on how the defense is playing. And there was a receiver who broke to the inside and forced the quarterback to try to make a tight throw there. And Nick got on him saying, "You keep doing that, and in an NFL game, you're going to get blown up." I mean, he was telling the wide receiver to stop breaking to the inside on that specific route against that look. And so he was coaching his wide receivers the way a wide receivers coach would.
As a wide receiver and a wide receiver coach, and Jason Avant, a wide receiver, what kind of role does he see for Zaccheaus in this offense? Does he think it's a fait accompli that he takes over for Quez Watkins, or does he think that's going to be something to watch?
Well, Jason brought up the upsides and the downsides. The upside is that he is a guy who can play the outside and the slot. All right. So he has that ability, which, a guy like Zach Pascal did not have. Zach Pascal was a slot receiver. You weren't going to line him up on the outside and make plays down the field with Zach Pascal. With Zaccheaus, you have that optionality, which is good. What you don't have with either Zaccheaus or per se with Quez Watkins as a slot receiver that you have with Pascal is blocking acumen and ability. And so when you have those guys out there in the slot and you're in 11 personnel looking like you want to pass, but you want to run, at times when you had Pascal in there, you can get a good crackback block or you can get a good run block in general. You can hold the cornerback in front of you, push him off the ball, but you don't have that like you used to now. So they'll have to be a little bit more creative in their run game and make sure that they can get everybody blocked up without having a really good physical receiver to do that.
Geoff Mosher, Football for Inside the Birds, the Inside the Birds podcast. Speaking of the run game, what does he think of the new run game with this new look run game with Penny, Swift, and I think what there's going to happen in running back is going to be definitely a story to watch. Once they get to camp, how do they shuffle these backs in and out? Is it going to be like the New England game style where one game Penny's the guy and the next game, don't draft an Eagles running back in fantasy because you never know which guy is going to be the guy who leads the team in touches.
It's like the old Patriots running backs thing. You can't draft them high. You don't know. Hey, by the way, if I tell you everything Jason said on the podcast, no one's going to listen to it, Mike. I'm just kidding. He's a big fan. I mean, I think most people are. He feels like it's a better overall group than what they've had in the past. And he pointed out a few reasons why he thinks they'll be different even utilized differently this year as opposed to years past.
Yeah, the duo there, which we think Penny and Swift I think all of us kind of look at that and wonder, are those two guys collectively going to be more productive than what Sanders was last year? I mean, people forget Sanders was a 1,200-yard, 11-touchdown guy, right? I mean, that's a lot of production that you're hoping that these two – but are they going to look to these two guys to do what one guy did?
And to your point, as we mentioned on today's podcast, which is the first of our contract series, Miles Sanders now makes more money this year than the entire 5 running backs for the Eagles put together, which is, unbelievable.
Right.
How cost efficient this running back group is. So one of the things Adam and I discussed to your question is sort of like, how does it work with DeAndre Swift and Rashad Penny, two guys who, when healthy, are they expect to be the feature back. They expect to carry the ball a lot. And the way we see it, Mike, and people might disagree. You might have different opinion too. You gave up the most resources for Swift, so he's your lead back. I mean, you actually gave up a 4th-round pick for him, right? Whereas Rashad Penny was a 1-year signing for only $650,000 fully guaranteed. Mm-hmm. So you've got Penny, you got Swift, right? Swift, is going to make it. Boston Scott actually makes more money than all of them. They brought him back and guaranteed like $1.5 million of his salary. So I feel like no matter how it shakes out, he's your 3. So you got Swift as your 1, you got Scott as your 3. I would think Kenny Gainwell still has a really good shot because of his versatility to be in the mix there. So if that's 3 running backs, to me, it kind of comes down to, well, you need the kind of your big bruiser, your 4th quarterback. Let's not forget about Trey Sermon, because even Nick Sirianni told everybody, don't forget about Trey Sermon. I see it now. The way I'm framing it now is that Rashad Penny versus Trey Sermon for a spot. Now, that doesn't mean it's the last spot. It's just for the role of the big bruising back on this team. And if Penny doesn't stay healthy, or if Penny looks like he's lost a little bit, again, he's only got $650 guaranteed. And Trey Sermon is younger, just as big, and is also on a rookie deal. So there might be some upside to keeping Trey over Penny if you just don't see what you're looking for in Penny this season.
I would ask you this, Moshe. I mean, if Penny's healthy and he makes it to the season healthy, I mean, I guess you're in your mind is, what was their outlook on? Like, what did they, when they signed him, what did they view him as? Just a flyer, or if this guy's healthy, he's our guy?
No, I mean, I feel like if they really felt all it was health separating him from being the guy, they wouldn't have given up a 4th-round pick for DeAndre Swift, right? I mean, they clearly got Swift because they feel he's a better overall player, which I think is fair. I mean, he catches the ball really well, runs like, crazy. I mean, he blazed the 40.
Would they have signed Penny if they knew they could get Swift?
I don't know. Maybe, because again, for $650,000, why not? Right? I mean, like, what are we talking about here? That's all it cost them. So that's the same amount of guaranteed money that Greedy Williams got and Zacchaeus basically got. I think Zacchaeus maybe got a little more. Yeah, I think it's 600. It's actually 600,000.
Yeah, it just becomes a very challenging situation to get all those guys touches.
Well, it does, but it does. That's what your training camp's for. That's what your 3 preseason games are for. I doubt that DeAndre Swift's going to see a whole lot of preseason time, right? You don't need to give a whole lot of reps to Boston Scott. You know what he is. I mean, I really think that the preseason games and the practices, you give Swift what he needs to get ready, but you're looking at Sermon and you're looking at Penny.
Yeah, well, I guess another question with Penny is what's the outlook? And if they have a big outlook for him, then I don't want him to get hurt in playing in preseason games, so I probably wouldn't see him all that much.
I would agree, but I think the contract already tells you what their outlook is for him. I mean, it can't be unless your thought process was they were trying to steal a great running back for little, and maybe that was. But again, then why did they go and get DeAndre Swift? So
yeah, the Swift thing does add another layer.
They're realistic about the situation.
Yeah, the Swift part of it does add another layer of, hey, this guy's now available. We didn't know he was available, but we're still willing to give up a 4th-round pick to go get him, even though we signed this other guy who we like a lot, but we just don't know what we're going to get.
Right. Yeah. Well, you know what? When they take the field of training camp and we start to see the rotations, we'll get a better idea of what they're really thinking.
Yeah, because, and you mentioned like Boston Scott, you got Scott and Gainwell. It seemed that they had more trust in as the season went on last year in the more important games. I mean, Gainwell, I think we can all agree, had a disappointing role for most of last season.
For the first half of the season. I thought he played fairly well in the second half of the season. He just wasn't being used a whole lot. Because remember, before the Super Bowl, for most of the year, Miles Sanders was really having a good year. So there was no reason really to kind of, make any changes. Miles was playing really well.
Yeah, well, and Scott, it's like you're always wondering when he plays well. It just he doesn't get the opportunity unless somebody seemingly gets hurt is when they go to him.
Yeah, I call it the Boston Scott wheel. In the middle of the game, they just spin like, does it come? If the little ticker goes on to Boston Scott, we give him a carry now.
Yeah, exactly. Like he'll just and then somebody's hurt and he goes in. He's like, why didn't this guy play more? Unbelievable. And then
right.
you mentioned the fact that they went out of their way to mention Sermon. They kept him all year last year, and so they got 5 guys that all have an intriguing story.
Yeah, and so at the end of the day, if I'm trying to be very rational about what I think their intentions are, even after, I think what they realized is over the last 2 years, they didn't really have a true 4-minute running back. They did not have a bruiser. They did not have a LeGarrette Blount type running back who, when you're up by 14 and you want to start to drain the clock and there's only 5 minutes left in the game, 4 minutes left, and you need tough yards, that's what you want, right? I mean, if anything, that guy has been Jalen Hurts for them, especially with all the 3rd and 1s and 4th and 1s and 4th and 2s, right? And they don't want to have to continue to beat him into submission. So Rashad Penny is built to be a bruiser. Trey Sermon's built to be a bruiser. Those are the only 2 guys that you would say among those 5 who you would want in that role. And that's why I think that they just gave themselves some optionality there.
So I guess the question is then, Geoff Mosher, Football at 4 from Inside the Birds podcast. The question is, it's 3rd and 1, and they need the yard. Penny's on the roster. Do they ask Jalen Hurts to get that with the mush push, or do they want to turn around and hand it off? Would they rather that?
I think that they would love to be able to hand that off to Rashad Penny and get more than 1 or 2 on it.
All right. Because they converted that at a pretty high rate last year.
Sure. Again, they did. It was successful, but it was also sort of out of necessity, right?
Yeah. Oh, no question.
Nobody for Jalen. There's nobody Jalen could turn around and hand the ball to who could actually squat more than Jalen could in the weight room.
Well, that's probably still the case, even though these guys are bigger.
It might still be the case. Yeah. I don't know, but Penny's got some monster calves, man. I tell you, he's a big dude.
Oh, Penny's great, dude. If he's healthy, he's the real deal when he's healthy. I mean, he averaged 6 yards a carry behind that offensive line.
I know. It's amazing, right? What he can do when he's healthy is pretty good.
All right, Football at 4, Geoff Mosher. Check out the latest Inside the Birds podcast. They take a look at some of the salary contractual situations with the Philadelphia Eagles. And go listen to the podcast with Jason Avant. He was very insightful, brought a very cool perspective to this offseason and what it looked like for the Philadelphia Eagles, who will be at camp in about a month from now. And, of course, the guys at Inside the Birds will be breaking it all down here on Football at 4. All right, Moshe.
All right, my friend. Enjoy the rest of your Juneteenth, all right? Talk to you Wednesday.